My name is Maria Garcia. I'm the author of the book We Made San Diego. This is my second book, and the purpose of this book was to tell about our history in San Diego, because there's so much history and we're not in the history books. I'm very proud of my book because it informs us about the many contributions Latinos, Mexican Americans, Chicanos have made to San Diego. Many of these contributions are not found in history books or even known by our own community. Have you ever wondered about Latinos in North County? What crosses your mind when you think of Latinos in that area? Just imagine a time when I-5 was citrus and avocado fields and agriculture workers were in demand. In this podcast, Lisa will share so much history about this first community in North County that is known as Eden Gardens. When I think of Eden Gardens, words such as unity, support, and common goals come to mind. This is Cipriana Gonzalez, who led the fight to maintain the church in Eden Gardens. Along with other parishioners, she fought the diocese, and when they did not support her, she sent a petition to the Vatican. The Vatican designated it as a mission, and you do not close missions. St. Leo's became the center not only for religious activities, but a place that hosted and supported community social activities. Eden Gardens is a community where Mexican and Mexican American students were segregated under the concept of the Americanization School. And even though most of the students were born there, they were not seen as Americans. The United States had Americanization schools throughout the country, and Eden Gardens was no different. It is a community that sent its young men off to war, not only World War II, but Korea, Vietnam, and every war after that. It honored its young men by building a war memorial inside the community center. There are pictures of these young men. The pride these families felt for the young men is evident, not only in the newspaper articles, but in the extra steps they took to preserve this piece of history. It is a community that is doing its best to preserve history. There is a restaurant, El Jacal, that has given back to the community. Original owner Tony Gonzalez supported sports teams and donated land for the Boys Club. The restaurant has become a place where movie stars, jockeys, and community members mix with each other. You see the value they place on youth when you look at the pictures of the different sports teams. You will see the worth the community places on education, evident not only in how it encourages their students to focus on education, but on the scholarships they give the students from the community. By watching this podcast, you will not only learn about the first neighborhood in Solana Beach, but the unity and the accomplishments of this wonderful community. There's so much to learn about La Colonia that I encourage you to watch the podcast and learn as we go along. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you,
I'm
Maria.
so pleased you're here. How many of you have heard of Eden Gardens? Where is Eden Gardens? If you go to the racetrack and you turn right, you might find Eden Gardens. Tell us a little bit about how to get to Eden Gardens.
Eden Gardens is located just north of the Del Mar Fairgrounds and off the I-5. It's about a mile away north of the Del Mar Fairgrounds. And it starts from Loma Santa Fe south by Genevieve Street, and then it goes all the way down to just right before you get to Villa de la Valle. So it is a small community, but it is Solana Beach's first neighborhood.
How did that community get started?
There was a need for agricultural workers in nearby Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar and Encinitas, and also Solana Beach. There were lima beans and tomatoes and citrus that needed to be picked and harvested, right? Harvested and picked. And there weren't many workers back in the day. We're talking the early 1920s.
Before Interstate 5.
Way before Interstate 5. And the Colonel Ed Fletcher and his brother-in-law, Eugene Batchelder, put out a calling to Mexican American families to come to Solana Beach to work, to live and work. So many people came from as far as Bisbee, the mining towns of Bisbee, Arizona, Santa Ana, California, where my family came, Hanford, California. They came to work and to establish a family and to develop a community.
And who came? What went on there?
So people caravanned from as far away as Bisbee, Arizona. Many families came, Gutierrez family, and then Hanford, California. The Hernandez family came. My family, which was the Gonzalez and the Scott families, came in from Santa Ana, California. So many families came. There were a little over 30 families that came and settled in what's now called historic La Colonia de Eden Gardens.
What I failed to mention at the beginning of the interview is that Lisa was born and raised in Eden Gardens. So she didn't come from anywhere. She was born and raised there.
Yes.
And her mother was born there.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Well, my mom was, her name was Celia Carmen, or Carmen Celia Scott. And she was born in La Colonia in 1929. Her parents and many of her family, her aunts and uncles, settled in La Colonia in the early 20s. And so my mom was born there in 29, and she was raised there with many of her cousins. She even attended an Americanization school that was established in La Colonia.
What is an Americanization school?
An Americanization school is a racially segregated school in those times for Mexican American children. You know, like I said, my mom was born there in La Colonia, in Solana Beach, but that's where she had to go to school. They were not allowed to go to the other schools with the other white children of various communities. So my mom went to school on Genevieve Street. They called it La Escuelita, as did many Mexican-American neighborhoods.
And many neighborhoods had desegregated schools.
Yes.
Under the pretext of Americanization.
To Americanize them. My mother's first language was Spanish, even though she was born in Solana Beach, in Eden Gardens. So when she went to school, you know, Spanish was not allowed in the schools. And so she was basically forced to learn only English. So I think that is where where the Spanglish was born, because my mom was no longer a native speaker of her native language, right? Of Spanish. And so, she could hold a conversation when she grew up and became an adult, but it wasn't like if that was her first language, right?
And it wasn't nurtured, so.
It wasn't nurtured, right.
Lisa's mother wasn't the only one. El Jacal's bartender, Ray Rincon, and his wife Teresa, as well as other Mexican-American students living in that community, experienced the same thing.
As we grew up, they tried to change us. Yeah, like to be American. Yeah, not. Oh no, yeah, yeah. They try to not to let us speak Spanish, for instance.
You grew up in Solana Beach. Tell me what it was like for you.
Well, for me, it was a magical experience. I mean, it had its magic. There were some struggles. I was one of 7 kids. I was the youngest of 7 kids. And I was born in 1964 when there were still dirt roads. And I vaguely remember as a child seeing the dirt roads. The I-5 was not there yet when I was born and when I was a little child. And so it was very, in a sense, kind of rural in a sense, where we had a beautiful creek, which years later I found out was called the Stevens Creek after the Stevens family who were settled there in the early 1900s, 1920s. And it was the arroyo that was in my backyard. So it was beautiful. It had beach sand and shells because we're very close to the beach.
Right.
And so we used to look for shells there. We didn't have a lot of money, so that was our saving grace. We could go play and just I would always pretend I was panning for gold in the sand. And there was bamboo, lots of bamboo and bamboo floats. So we would build rafts and make teepees and forts and things. And then there was sugarcane there. and grapes that would grow there. So we had a feast when we would play out there with our friends. It was a very imaginative childhood for me. And also I was surrounded by family.
Talk more about that.
A lot of my aunts and uncles, lived down the street or just up the street. There were church fiestas. My family helped develop St. Leo's Church. Well, it's now Mission, and so we would have 3-day church fiestas. And my family, my father would be very involved, like as one of the church fiesta chairmen, and my mom would also get involved with the fiesta queen. We had 3-day fiestas where the fiesta queen would reign. The fiesta would be there. So it was 3 days, and it had rides. I remember beautiful, wonderful rides. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, would make cascarones for the fiestas, confetti eggs, and she would sell them for 10 cents. And those eggs would be, all the money raised would go back to the church. So I was surrounded by family. And it was a wonderful place for me to grow up. I saw my family do so much for the community. I think that's that was instilled in me at a very young age. You gave back. My father was involved. My uncle was involved in the formation of the first Solana Beach Boys Club on Stevens, and he donated he loaned out the first property on Stevens to the boys club, because it wasn't girls at that time,
Right.
for $1. So and then education was starting. People were, our kids needed a better education. We wanted our kids to go to college or to at least to have that opportunity. So there was a lot of positive. We played a lot of softball. There was a boxing club that was established in La Colonia, lots of different activities for us.
You said St. Leo's Church.
Yes.
Now it's a mission. How did that happen?
Well, St. Leo's originally was an army barrack. It came from Camp Kellen, which is on the Torrey Pines Mesa, that area. And so it was when the families came to La Colonia in the 20s, there weren't any homes and there weren't any places of worship. So it was an army barrack that was moved there to the present site, or the present property. Then eventually the families, like my grandmother and many of our neighbors and relatives, raised the money to build a new church where the present day church is at, and it's called a mission. It was a church originally, now it's a mission. They raised about $2,700, and they actually won a National Church Architecture Award because they built that church with so little money. And so it's been renovated throughout the years, but where the church now is, that's where they raised the money and built that church, and that's St. Leo's Mission, not one of Father Junipero Serra's missions, but St. Leo's mission, and that's where it's at today.
The diocese wanted to close it. Tell us about that.
Well, the San Diego Diocese, Catholic Diocese, wanted to shut the church down. I believe it was about the early 1970s. They wanted all the parishioners to go up to St. James Church, which is on Nardo. It's up a hill. It's a very steep hill. And my mother's aunt, which is my tia Cipriana Gonzalez, she was a trailblazer from the get-go, from desegregation of schools. She took it upon herself and worked with the community members to say, no, we raise the money for this church and we go to church here. We want to stay here. This is our church. So after working with the San Diego Diocese, they didn't support that, and they wanted people to go up to St. James. So she took it upon herself and wrote to the Pope. And
that was not her first letter. Where did the first petition go?
Well, she wrote to the Papal Nuncio, which has direct out of Washington D.C., who has direct consultation with the Pope in Rome. Okay, and said, this is our church. The church is a community, right? And we raise the money for this church. we want to stay here. This is our church. And so the Papal Nuncio, with consultation with the Pope, agreed with her that the church is the community, and that St. Leo's should never be closed. They will name it a mission. It would become a mission. So it's not, I tell people, it's not whether Father Junipero Serra's missions, but it is a mission and it can't be closed. Even some of the property was donated by a community member, business owner named Pancho Garcia, Francisco Garcia. He donated the current parking lot to the church. So there was a collaborative effort from the community to establish the new St. Leo's mission.
There was a lot of fundraising.
Yes.
And I wanted you to tell us who the famous person was that helped fundraise. And I also wanted you to tell us about the first wedding at St. Leo's.
Okay. So because La Colonia is so close to the Del Mar racetrack, the fairgrounds, originally there was, on the racetrack property, there was an airport near there, I should say, and the Del Mar Airport. And my uncle, my mother's uncle, my great uncle, Tony Gonzalez, he ran the Del Mar coffee shop at the airport. He got to know a lot of Hollywood movie stars because he would fly in, or sometimes he would drive in to play the ponies, the horses. Jimmy Durante, and Pat O'Brien and Bing Crosby were very involved in the formation of the racetrack. Desi Arnaz, he bought property in Del Mar on the beach. He was Catholic. So he would go to the St. James, St. Leo's Parish. He would go to church there. And he was Cuban, and he spoke Spanish. So he gravitated towards historic La Colonia because of him speaking Spanish. He would dine there at my aunt and uncle's restaurant, Tony Sacal, with Lucy and the kids. And he would also perform at the church fiestas, him and his son. We have a news article of Desi performing at the church fiesta with his son, Desi Jr. So, he was involved. La Colonia, and it's the character of La Colonia is what drew him to the community, plus my uncle knowing so many people.
But you didn't tell me who the first wedding at the church was.
My mom was the first bride married at the newly built St. Leo's mission, or church, I should say, at that time. In 1947, so my mom was born in La Colonia in 1929. She went to school there, the Americanization school, and she eventually got married there and lived there and raised us. So, yeah, it was, it's historic, and it's a part of who I am. La Colonia will never leave me. One thing I wanted to add to is, because Hollywood would come and they want good Mexican food, Elizabeth Taylor was a regular at Tony Sacal. She would come, and my cousin Catalina, or Liza, my cousin Liza Salgado, would say, I would serve her, and she was always so gracious, and she would always want to sit in the patio to have her meal. So many people, John Wayne, and many.
J. Edgar Hoover
came. My cousin's husband said, we got a call that there was somebody that was very prominent was coming to Tony Sacal, but they wouldn't tell us who it was until it was J. Edgar Hoover that came in with his entourage. So many people. If you go into the restaurant now, which serves about 200 people, seats about 200 people, you'll see photos of John Wayne and many jockeys, famous jockeys.
Yeah, that was a place for a jockey hangout. How
it sure was.
Yeah,
Shoemaker and all, famous jockeys would go there and to have a wonderful bite to eat. And
I can vouch for the food.
Yes.
Okay, so you go to college?
I went to college, and one thing was education was very important in La Colonia. My tia Cipriana, if you graduated high school back in the day, you got your photo on her wall in her home. So it really inspired her grandkids to say, I want my photo on that wall. If I don't get a high school diploma, my photo's not going to go on there, right? Many of them went off to college, and she also helped establish, her and my Uncle Tony, my Tia Catalina, helped establish the Mexican American Educational Guidance Association, MEGA, which has raised millions of dollars already to send Latino students to college. We have many students that have graduated from the best, Yale and Harvard and Columbia, just different universities. And we have MIT, Richard Huizar. And so education was very important for our community.
That community also gave in the war effort, both World War II, Korea,
Yes.
and the war since then. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Many Mexican Americans from La Colonia went off to the war, various wars, and brought back Purple Hearts. And as a matter of fact, some didn't come back. In Vietnam, more recently in Vietnam, we lost Victor Chief Lopez. Chief was his nickname. He was only 19 years old when he went to Vietnam. And his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lopez, were pillars in our community and very faithful people, faith-driven people. And it's sad because, they lost their son, they lost their baby. And it really rocked our community because his name is always mentioned now. I never knew him, but I know him through the stories and the photos that people have shared. We have at La Colonia we have a veterans wall of Latino veterans, and it's in our community hall that my mother's cousin, who's my cousin, Robert Chuckles Hernandez, established, because we know that many of them, went to war and were injured or some didn't come back. So we wanted to make sure that their efforts for this country, were seen and were acknowledged. So we have a veterans wall. We also have a monument as well. We also have the Veterans Courtyard, that one is for all veterans of Solana Beach, and La Colonia is strongly represented there.
You, as a child, you had a very special Christmas memory. Talk about that.
Well, I first have to start when I was growing up, because, as a little girl, you read these books in class about Santa Claus, because in those times you could celebrate Christmas. And so we would read these holiday books about Santa coming down a chimney. And I was always confused because we didn't have a chimney growing up, and very few people did in La Colonia. And I said, well, he didn't come down a chimney in my home. He never did. He parachuted out of an airplane. And I tell that story because we would line up on Valley Avenue, which is the main street of La Colonia. It's the heart of La Colonia, the Eden Gardens. And we'd wait for Santa Claus, an airplane, to come from the sky. And Santa Claus would actually parachute out in a red suit for us in Solana Beach. He would land over there by where Marshall's is. Now there's a Marshall's store. It was barren field at that point. We're talking probably 1970. And it was actually my uncle, my dad's brother, Rick Montes, that would jump. He would parachute out. And then the fire department would bring another person, usually his name was Art Theas, dressed up as Santa. And then someone would retrieve my uncle, but he would parachute out for us children. And it was magical because we would always want to be the first person to see the airplane. We want, there it is, there's that airplane. And I just remember the door opening and watching my uncle get ready to crouch and to jump for us kids. It's something that I will take to my grave because it was magical for me. And we would all line up, and then we would, the local service organization would give us little stockings. And I remember they were made out of like a net, like a plastic net with candy different, and it was already pre-filled, right? And that's what we got. And we sat on Mr. Theas's his lap, and I remember he had green eyes, and Art Theas and his wife Emma were very involved in our community. They lived in our community. So that was truly a collaborative effort too, to put this festivity on for us kids in La Colonia.
La Colonia is very kid community oriented.
Yes.
Very, even now.
Yes.
How do you think that has survived, and what are some of the major things that community has done for others and for their neighbors?
Well, there's several things several efforts because, when Mega started, was to make sure that our kids have scholarships to go to college, so that college was a viable option for them, that money wouldn't be a barrier for them. So there's a lot of money raised. There was the boxing club to keep kids active. There was my uncle, my mother's uncle, my great uncle, Tony Gonzalez, and his wife donated a lot of money to Little League soccer, and for kids to be able to be involved in activities. And then reading was essential for our kids. Currently now we have 3 neighborhood libraries in La Colonia. And I fill those libraries up with beautiful books. People throughout Solana Beach will give me books, as well as an organization I'm very involved in, which is called Empowering Latino Futures. One branch of Empowering Latino Futures is called Education Begins in the Home, and it's run by Edward Becerra. And they ensure that kids have plenty of books in their homes to read. We have wonderful programs that tutor children for free. One of them is called Casa Amistad. And they bring in tutors trained from like UCSD and different universities to teach and tutor predominantly Latino kids in our community.
Did Eden Garden experience some of the things that went on in other communities? Drugs, gangs, that type of thing?
Yes, like every community across this nation, right? Even Rancho Santa Fe has had their drug problems, but it's all behind doors, right? So we did have that, and we were tired of it. Unfortunately, when I was a child, I would see drug deals going on. Like people would just stop right in the middle of the street, and then there would be somebody that would be getting their drugs and paying them off or whatever it was. And I'm blessed that my mother and I kept me right there with her, and I was youngest, and my other brothers and sisters watched out for me. But just like any other neighborhood, there's always something that's not positive, right? But the community of Eden Gardens said, stop, we've had enough. They formed Eden Gardens Against Drugs in the early 80s to put a stop, to take control of this community and to stop the drugs. And they were very successful in doing so. So some wonderful people like Alice Granados and Gabriel Granados, a lot of other people, the Christy Alaman, and who's married to my cousin Paul, a lot of wonderful people pulled together and say, no, we've had enough. This is our community. We're going to clean it up. And they did.
If I drove up to Eden Gardens today, what would I find?
You would find a beautiful park called La Colonia Community Center that La Colonia Park, I should say, that my tia Cipriana Gonzalez advocated for. She was a trailblazer in this community. She went all the way to the Pope to keep St. Leo's open. She fought for desegregation of schools, and she advocated for a park for families to come together. Not only Latino families, but families of Solana Beach, because she knew that we needed to, in order to really be a solid community of Solana Beach, our children needed to play together, learn from one another. Families needed to congregate. So she and others, but she was the one that was a leading force that worked with the county, because Solana Beach didn't incorporate till way later. And so it was under county jurisdiction to find the money and the land to build a park for all children to play. So we're really excited because, and in 1981, it was open. and she was one of the keynote speakers. She now today I'm working with the city of Solana Beach to name the new children's tot lot, a playground, after her. And they've agreed, and that's going to take place pretty soon.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
I know the History Center is located there. What is that History Center besides the little building?
So we have the Solana Beach Heritage Museum, and I'm the curator, the museum curator of the Heritage Museum. And we're trying to preserve, document the history of not only Solana Beach Greater, but Solana Beach's first neighborhood, La Colonia, the Eden Gardens. So if you go through, we've been working on an archive project. We've been digitizing lots of history so that when we're gone, we have the history documented. If you go, we have these wonderful maps that they are built with QR codes. So you can take a walking tour of Solana Beach, which includes La Colonia, Eden Gardens, and you can go to specific historic buildings, click on the QR code and learn about that building and what was once there, right? Because remember I told you earlier that there wasn't a community there, and then when the families came to La Colonia, because there was segregation, they couldn't go to Highway 101, which was called Highway 101 then, to go get a haircut, like if a child wanted to go to school. And they couldn't go to the barber shop. They were turned away because of racism. And so La Colonia families had to create their own grocery stores, their own barber shops, and their own places of worship. So it's there, and it's a thriving community. Unfortunately, gentrification, like many communities across the United States, is taking over La Colonia. It is a very expensive place to live because we're very close to the beach and near Del Mar. And unfortunately, about 70% of the families have sold out the properties. I can walk down Valley Avenue. I don't know most of my neighbors. They're very wealthy. They build their big homes, there. And unfortunately, you'll see gated communities. When I was growing up, there weren't any gated communities there. I could walk through, someone's backyard if I was going to go home and walk through the backyard and say hi and be on my way. Now there's gated communities. And it's really sad to see because that wasn't what we were all about. Everyone knew each other in La Colonia and helped each other. When the community was founded, if you were a bricklayer, you helped build someone's house. People helped each other if someone got sick. We even have we've had our own cemetery in Carmel Valley, and it still exists today. That's where my grandmother is buried. My grandma, Trinidad Gonzalez Scott, was buried there, and my uncle Richard Scott, her son, and many other families. But it's not a manicured cemetery like you would see. There is no irrigation there, so it's dirt and weeds. So we have a team, wonderful people, of Michael Beltran and a lot of other volunteers, families would get together about 3 times a year to spruce up the cemetery. And I would always come in with flowers and leave flowers there. And but it's very important for our community. That's our history. That's where a lot of people were buried from La Colonia. And back in the day, people would you would have a funeral at someone's house. You wouldn't go to a mortuary. In the house I live in today, that's where we've had funerals in the living room. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was, and everyone helped each other out. So, but La Colonia has restaurants. We have Fidel's and Tony Sacal. We have a wonderful park and a new tot lot for kids to play. We've got the Heritage Museum. We have 2 churches. There were 2 churches of worship, places of worship. One was the Catholic Church, and the other was the Apostolic Tabernacle, which originally was on Vera Street. And the community raised the money to build that church too, but now it's on Genevieve. Francisco and Juana Gutierrez, who were pillars in our community, they were trailblazers too. They helped bring the irrigation to La Colonia when Lake Hodges was built. And if you haven't been to Lake Hodges, it's going through, like if you're going into Rancho Santa Fe, that's where it's at. So they were able to bring the irrigation to La Colonia. We even had and so they were also helped with bricklaying and like Don Francisco Gutierrez. Everyone helped each other out, build that community. When my mom was growing up, they had a circus that would come to town, and I know you and I have talked about the circus, the Mexican circus, because we've be able to piece things together that the circus would come to different communities, Latino communities. So right next to the house that my grandparents owned, the circus would come. And they would ask my grandfather if they could use his irrigation to water down the animals and, clean down the circus. And he said, absolutely. And in turn, they would give him tickets for the circus. So, what community had a circus? La Colonia sure did.
Logan Heights did.
Logan Heights did.
Yeah.
And what community, where Santa Claus would jump parachute out of an airplane? La Colonia sure did.
Today, when we're facing a lot of situations that are very difficult for our families, how is La Colonia helping?
We have formed, it's a vulnerable time in our nation's history, and people aren't safe. And so we formed a big group of people, and mostly are white, affluent, college educated people that have come together and said, we care about our community. This is Solana Beach. Whether it's in Eden Gardens, that's okay. Eden Gardens is a beautiful community, but it's Solana Beach, and we want to help. And so we formed this group of people that are trying to keep our families safe, keep them fed, and trying to help them just feel like they are a part of this community, and if there's a need, well, maybe we can help, right? Make sure that they have the medical attention that they need. In La Colonia, we have a medical and dental clinic, which is based at St. Leo's Mission. And that was put together by some wonderful people who cared about the community. And not only La Colonia, but people that can't afford, maybe they don't have dental insurance, and maybe they have a toothache and they don't have the money to go to a dentist. You know how expensive it is to go to a dentist. Or they need medical care. Maybe they don't have insurance. They can go to the medical clinic at St. Leo's, which is all staffed by volunteer doctors, right? And staff. Same thing with the dental clinic. If they have a toothache, so it's basically emergency dental care. If you have a toothache and you don't have insurance, you can go to the dental clinic, and it's all staffed by volunteer dentists.
I know about the food giveaway. Tell us about that.
Every Sunday, we have a free farmer's market. Free, okay? But it lasts only within, the food is gone in 30 minutes because it's free. It's quality food. Jimbo's markets, they sell organic fruit and vegetables, wonderful food. But many people can't access that. It's expensive, right, to buy organic food. And the wonderful people of Jimbo's have given us food every week. And we have this free farmers market. Anyone can come, okay? You don't have to be from La Colonia. You don't have to be from Solana Beach. We have people coming in from Cardiff that want to come and get food. We have beautiful berries and just wonderful food. Bread, Panera stores, restaurant has given us food. They give it to us every week. We get milk and food from excess food from the schools, the school district, and they have lunches. They have excess lunches. They give them to us. So food is not an issue in our community. If there's someone that's hungry, we can usually feed them. But it's a wonderful group. It was formed by Jenna Delamano, this free farmers market, who started this nonprofit because she saw kids in our Solana Beach schools that when they would go home, they didn't have enough food to eat. So she started filling up their backpacks. She just did it on her own. She would use her own money, and then people would give her money, and she would fill those backpacks up every Friday so those kids would have enough food to take home. That's how it evolved. And other people started giving, donating, and then they started they met the people from Jimbo's, yes, and they give us tons of food, and Panera. And then her friend Amy Bryan jumped in and said, I want to help. So Amy runs the free farmers market now, and Jenna oversees the backpack for kids and, making sure like kids get enough food. So it's bigger now. And every Sunday at 10 o'clock sharp, you have to be there a little early so you can know the rules, the rules to get food. Bring your bags, your plastic bags for your food or your paper bags, and you can get free food every week.
Where will La Colonia be in 5 years? How do you see it evolving?
Well, I talked about gentrification, and unfortunately, gentrification has taken over most of our community. The homes there, are very expensive now, and we have 3 big apartments that house there are like about 18. One of the apartments is about 18 apartments. Another is probably about the same, and there's another one right across from St. Leo's Church Mission, right where the Americanization School is, on Genevieve. Those are very old. Those were built in the 1970s, so they're very old, right? Over 50 years old now, and I don't see them being there too long. And we have seen many of these older apartments being bulldozed because these owners of these buildings know that they can make more money. They can rebuild and charge a lot of money for a condo or an apartment.
So are we thinking that in 5 years it will not be a Latino community?
It's very close to, I would say, in the next 10 years. And it's, there's just pockets now of Latinos, and just some homes left. People are trying to hang on, but it's really tough, because what you can get for a price of a property. And right, it's just that's why the Historical Society, Solana Beach Civic and Historical Society, are working so hard to document the history. And that's why we have these historical plaques, not only in La Colonia, but in Solana Beach Greater, that tells the history of that particular building. Is so important that we don't lose that history. And one of the things I do as a curator is myself and our board president, Jojo Bogard, we bring in 3rd graders from Solana Beach every year, twice a year, and we teach them the history of Solana Beach, and which includes a lot of La Colonia. We developed a 10-minute video with no sound, but it talks about, Ned Bushyhead, who was a Cherokee Native American who owned all the land before Ed Fletcher and Eugene Batchelder bought it up. And he was from the he was from the Trail of Tears. And so he owned all that property. I think he also was very involved in the formation of the San Diego Union Tribune. So Ned Bushyhead, and then the Kumeyaay, that was called Kumeyaay land. Yeah. Right. So there's a lot of history there. So we teach the kids about the Kumeyaay, and about Solana Beach and the Stevens Creek, which is my arroyo, my playground. We teach them about the formation of La Colonia and how the families came from different parts to establish Solana Beach's first neighborhood, and what they did, the stores that they built there, the restaurants, and what they did for the community, all the different activities for kids. The first boys clubs was in La Colonia. So, the boxing club, there's so much that we're so proud of.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think we should know about La Colonia?
We're very proud that we've sent many students off to college. And I think that if we would have realized what was going to happen in the future about gentrification taking over our communities, and if we would have really could see that if our children were off to go off to college and finish and go into these professional careers, maybe some of those homes will still be here today. I have directly seen it with the graduation of Richard Weezer from MIT. He was able to, just not too long ago, about 2 years ago, buy his grandparents' property in La Colonia. And now we have an MIT graduate who works for Apple, by the way, is an engineer for Apple. He lives there now. But I think if we knew that 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and really push our kids to go to college or to learn and come back. I have my cousin, Richie Gutierrez Villaseñor, who was able to buy there because he has 2 master's degrees. And his wife went to Purdue, graduated from Purdue, and he works for Penn State, but online. He's a graduate advisor. He was able to buy his grandparents' home in La Colonia. And is involved in Solana Beach, in the city. He sits on the view assessment committee for the city, so he's involved. And his family started a business there as well.
I want to thank you for your time and all your knowledge. We really appreciate it, and I really urge you, if you have not been to the Eden Garden community, to go up and just check it out for yourself.
Yes, welcome, and look me up if you come. But yeah, check out our park, and it's a wonderful place, and come to one of our restaurants there and say hello.
Okay. Thank you,
Maria.
Everybody. Thank you so much, too. Thank you for taking the time to tune in to the We Made San Diego audio-video podcast. Please subscribe. Visit our website, wemadesandiego.com, to learn more. My name is Maria E. Garcia. Adios.
Did you know?